Can I have everybody's attention, please? So would the graduating seniors please come forward and take seats in front of us? And could I also ask faculty from Contemplative Studies to come and take seats facing the graduating students? So welcome, parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, brothers and sisters, friends, partners. Um, my name is Hal Roth, and I direct the Contemplative Studies program here at Brown. And I'd like to welcome you to the commencement ceremony for 2024. We have a very unique program here, and I'd like to tell you a few words about it before we get into the details of the program as part of what on your program, which many of you should have from the tables where you're sitting, listed as welcoming comments. So we also have a number of alumni who have returned. Contemplative Studies concentrators from the past, and people who would have concentrated in Contemplative Studies had there been a Contemplative Studies concentration at the time. So we'll be introducing them as well. One of them will be giving the distinguished alumnus talk in a few minutes. So I'm trained as a scholar of classical Chinese philosophy and religion with a specialization in Taoist contemplative traditions. And I've been working with my colleagues here since the spring of 2000 to build a program in contemplative studies. The young people who are graduating this weekend today attest to the successes we have had in building that program that has essentially involved bootstrapping an entirely new academic field at a prestigious Ivy League institution that, on paper, encourages thinking outside the box, but gets very nervous when you actually do it because you might think too far outside the box. So I'll spend a few minutes talking to you about contemplative studies and what we do. Then my colleague, Professor Larson Di Fiore, will have his opening remarks. We will then introduce our distinguished alumnus, Sandeep Nayak from the class of 2012, who will talk to us about contemplative studies and its influence and his work. Then we will move to the diploma, handing out the diplomas, and finally we will end with the awards and also give students any final opportunity to reflect on their time in contemplative studies. Please note that in the program, the printed program, and then the program that keeps changing on the screens, students have written a paragraph about addressing what their interests have been and the importance contemplative studies has had in their lives. So please take the opportunity to read that. It's a very important summary for the students of how they've engaged with the work here. So before going on any further, I want to take the opportunity to formally acknowledge the work of our very skilled and dedicated program coordinator, office manager, unofficial advisor, in essence, our factotum and major domo, my good friend now for 30 some odd years, Ann Hireman Hart. Ann, please wave to everybody. Please stand up. Ann really makes contemplative studies function and takes all the crazy ideas that we come up with and brings them into reality. Your daughters and sons, brothers and sisters, partners and friends are graduating today in an important new academic field that we have helped to pioneer here at Brown. The Contemplative Studies concentration approved here 9 years ago this month. No, actually 10 years ago this month, has now trained 70 concentrators. The young people we honor this evening or this afternoon will be the 9th graduating cohort in Contemplative Studies. We began developing the field 20 years ago with a faculty forum on cross-cultural approaches to what we then called contemplative mind, a consciousness that is attentively focused, fully aware of what it is experiencing internally and externally, a mind that is well integrated into the body, a mind that is often insightful because of a spontaneous, intuitive, cognitive activity always operating, but seldom recognized. It has been our contention that there are a variety of methods and practices that lead to such distinctive states of mind. They are both experienced spontaneously in deep moments of absorption in an activity and deliberately cultivated within the world's great wisdom traditions. These experiences occur on a spectrum from the total absorption in an activity, such as a game of chess or a sport like lacrosse or baseball, to the deeply transformative experiences of lifelong yogis in samadhi, Jewish mystics in devakut, or Zen monks in moments of satori. These experiences are all inherent in our potential as human beings, a significant aspect of our natures that can yield greater mental and physical well-being and pro-social experiences of compassion and authentic engagement in the world. Such contemplative experiences, because of their potential to transform individual lives and to contribute significantly to the greater social good, are worthy of special attention in their own academic field. And that is what we have attempted to do in establishing contemplative studies. Contemplative studies begins with a vision that the sciences, the humanities, and the creative arts do not have to be, borrowing the words of the late evolutionary biologist Stephen Jay Gould, the non-overlapping magisteria that they've been conceived to be in the academy in the 20th and early 21st centuries. They are instead mutually complementary modes of investigation into the full range of phenomena we experience in our lives. In contemplative studies, we focus on consciousness as it is embodied and as it is enacted in concert with the many and varied contexts of an environment that we co-create. Simultaneously, environment and individual arise together and can best be studied by a methodology that combines third-person modes of knowledge, such as brain sciences, religious studies, clinical sciences, and philosophy, with critical first-person experiential modes of investigation that include the creative arts. In addition, in contemplative studies, we recognize the importance of second-person, unself-conscious, intersubjective experiences of full manifestation and deep listening, and the no-person spontaneous synthesis of all these elements into the unified whole of our individual and collective experience. Could you turn the fan back on? Yeah. If you're uncomfortable there, then it's not as strong on that side, or just move away from it. Doesn't seem to be able to be modulated. Furthermore, in contemplative studies, we feel it is important to not only study the common dimensions of these experiences that are found in all contemplative traditions, we also feel it greatly increases our knowledge of them to carefully study them in the rich cultural and religious context from which they have emerged. We do this out of a profound respect for these contexts and also to better understand how these contexts enrich the experiences themselves and better grasp what we lose and what we gain from deracinating these practices and then recontextualizing them in modern academic discourse and clinical contexts. Each of your daughters and sons has met a demanding concentration in either the sciences, the humanities, or the arts that has required both a depth of knowledge in their area and a breadth of knowledge that includes the others. However, it is also true that each of them has brought something unique to our program and into our community. Their particular set of life experiences in which all of you quite obviously have played very significant roles. Through their courses of study, they have each forged distinctive concentrations that we hope have given them not just a knowledge base with which to enter specific fields of endeavor as they leave, but an experiential grounding that will allow them to weather the various challenges they will face in their lives with equanimity and resilience. In short, we hope that we have imparted to them over the last few years a strong foundation in what I would like to call contemplative intelligence. In going out into the world with this foundation, they will be following in the footsteps of many of our previous concentrators who have already become involved in a fascinating range of professions that include clinical psychology, neuroscience, public school teaching, public health, peace studies, community organizing, working in conservation, psychological counseling, journalism, psychedelic psychotherapy, prison reform, traditional Chinese medicine, psychiatry, nursing, rabbinical school, medicine, philosophy of education, music teaching, tech startups, osteopathy, yoga teaching, editing the New York Times podcast, The Daily, and working on the team that organizes the annual Burning Man Festival. And even in one case, teaching Zen meditation to the former FARC rebels in Colombia. In short, a full range of careers in service to society in which the contemplative perspectives and practices they mastered during their time here have had significant influence on their lives and on the many lives of people with whom they have interacted. This graduating class is in many ways a very special one. You've all been directly affected by the appalling uncertainties of life and death caused by the COVID epidemic. You are the students who spent their first 2 or 3 semesters at Brown studying completely online and living in pods, these odd things, surrounded by the challenges of not being able to freely communicate with one another. The frustration of taking your classes online or in person wearing masks, the uncertainties of the university administration's decision-making, and the feeling of the disappointment of not being able to have the experience of the important types of social relationships and friendship development that have been typical throughout higher education in all but the COVID years. So I was looking back at my class rosters from 2020 and 2021, and I see a fair number of students from those courses that are here today. Enrollments in our courses immediately doubled in the spring of 2021. But students at that point were still not able to interact with one another except on a computer screen. But because many of our courses also entailed contemplative practices that we did together, there was a sense of community and mutual support that developed that went beyond what was normally the case when you interacted with one another only on a screen. And I'm very pleased to say that quite a number of our graduating seniors today were in these courses, including, by the way, a few of you who had an experience which is unique in the history of Brown and will probably be unique, unless there's another pandemic, hopefully, not. And that is you got a free course from Brown. So in the fall of 2020, incoming first-year students were asked not to come to campus, but to have a class online. And Ed and Isha were both in that first online course, along with a number of other students who graduated. Joe Hall and Liz Kaplan were also in that course. And Kento Suzuki, who somehow is here in spirit as part of this group. So we want to acknowledge him wherever he is. And also DeAndre Jordan. and they were, quickly followed in the next year by many of the students who are here today, including Yukti and James and Gabe, and a number of their friends who've graduated, Malini Naidu and Kate Salka. And then we had this wonderful gathering that happened in June of 2021, where most of the students in the classes I was teaching only knew each other online and didn't really know each other physically. And the COVID conditions seemed to be relaxed to the point that we ended up having a party for the students on the back deck of our house. So everybody's outside. And students talk a lot when they're excited. I have never seen students talk that long, that intensively and that long. There were about 15 students from these classes, and it was wonderful. It was a chance. The first time they've been in classes together, and it was the first time they had the opportunity to talk to one another in person. Quite moving. Difficult times, no doubt, but we were able to use the resources of contemplative practice and the emphasis we place on intersubjective communications to help weather these difficulties, along with undoubtedly the support and love you all gave your children, your siblings, your partners, your friends. There is no doubt that because of these experiences, and due in part to the training we hope we have provided for you all, today's graduates will join our previous 59 contemplative alumni in truly making a difference in this world. A deep and heartfelt appreciation to all our graduates today, and to your families and friends who have helped create your own worlds of experience that have enabled you to flourish and to reach this important milestone in your lives. So I want to also quickly introduce colleagues who are here, who are part of our faculty. Many of our faculty teach in other departments and are at the commencement ceremonies of these other departments. So I want to first recognize Dr. Srinivas Reddy. Srini, could you stand up? Srini was really one of the kind of founding visionaries of contemplative studies. He's a brilliant sitar maestro, and he's been kind of part of our family. He was in the class of 1998 at Brown, one of the first South Asian studies students to graduate, and he went on to do a PhD at Berkeley. He's published 3 books, and he is sadly leaving us. He got a Fulbright to go to India next year, and then he'll stay on at the Indian Institute of Technology in Ahmedabad. So please join me in giving him a special round of applause. Dr. Larson D. Fiore. Larson was my freshman advisee in the fall of 2004, and he's kind of experienced Providence and Brown, like the Eagles talk about in the Hotel California. He has tried to check out a number of times, but he has not been able to leave, to our great pleasure and delight. I'd like to also introduce, I don't know quite how to introduce Chloe, because Chloe is an alum, but she's also a research director. She's also in the MD PhD program. And she's just been a very special presence here, often giving me advice on what neuroscientists think about the world, which I greatly appreciate. She ran the late Kathy Kerr's lab. We'll have more to say about Kathy at the end of our ceremony today. But Kathy also was one of the kind of pioneering founding members of contemplative studies. And Chloe, could you stand up and... So I think without, it's kind of odd to do this, but one of the graduates today has also been a very valuable faculty member. This is a very unusual situation. And I really, so this person has started and dropped out of Brown a couple of times, but when he dropped out, he founded this absolutely brilliant repertory theater company in Warren, Rhode Island, which he ran and acted in and directed plays in for 18 years. And he really, to our great benefit, decided to come back to Brown and finish his undergraduate degree in contemplative studies. So he's been, to me, a very important sounding board for ideas. He's worked with me in a number of courses in the past year and a half. He's of course graduating, but he's also kind of a faculty member too. So Ed Shea, would you please stand up? Now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our speaker, our visiting alumnus from the class of 2012, a concentrator before there was a concentration. We're very proud of what Sandeep Nayak has done. He works in the Johns Hopkins University Research Program in testing out the transformative effects and the curative effects of psilocybin. It's the only lab that was permitted to do this research for the better part of the last 2 decades. He went to Brown Medical School and he did his residency at Johns Hopkins. He's a psychiatrist and he will give us our distinguished alumnus talk. So please join me in welcoming Sandeep Nayak.
Thank you, Hal, and thank you, everyone. It's a great honor to be here. I owe a great deal of my career trajectory and even my personal life to contemplative studies, which I did not concentrate in because it didn't exist, but nonetheless was my academic home. And like most of you, I was drawn to this because it's this really appealing mixture of academics and practice and meditation and history and neuroscience, whatever it might be for you. But I had no clue that 12 years later, I would be living my contemplative studies dream. And so I have the fortune of designing studies where we give big doses of psychedelic drugs to people and attempt to treat their psychiatric conditions, which regularly produces large, profound, mystical experiences. And it seems to work. And this puts me in regular contact with doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists, anthropologists, philosophers. And I really do owe, the roots of this really did start with contemplative studies here at Brown. And there were a couple of roots, I think. I mean, the first, and this is hard to overstate, was just a sense that such unusual coloring outside of the lines type things are actually possible. Having the examples of people like Hal, like Kathy, Judd Brewer, people who are actually doing it or doing a version of it, straddling different disciplines, but doing so in a way that's actually meaningful. That was incredibly meaningful for me to see. And it gave some reality to the belief that I could do it in my own way as well. But also the relationships. I mean, it's very cliche, but the real contemplative studies is the friends you make along the way. Unless you're an extremely confident person or a genius, your dreams will wither and die without support and fanning from like nurturing, like-minded people. So really kind of cherish and retain those. And there's a third thing too, and I think anyone who works successfully in interdisciplinary work needs to achieve, and that's a strong grounding in a traditional discipline. So I love interdisciplinary work, and contemplative studies is interdisciplinary, but that's also ambiguous. So this could mean a blending, like as in the sense of something that comes out of a blender, where the original constituents are destroyed or reduced to some sort of smoothie, something without real shape or form, but is delicious. And I think that all interdisciplinary endeavors are sometimes guilty of this. But it's this very thing that draws us to interdisciplinary work, that you can connect so many different fascinating fields that can also make it collapse on itself, broadening but becoming too thin, becoming nebulous, too spread out. And so another approach that I think is very fruitful is, firm roots in a discipline or a couple. And then I didn't actually work this metaphor out sufficiently, but maybe the branches are touching each other. But interdisciplinary work requires a discipline. It requires a foundation. There are some, I think, extremely interesting or helpful metaphors I've learned from neuroscience and machine learning, and one of them is the explore-exploit trade-off. I don't know, is anyone familiar with this? So this is basically a trade-off between seeking new information that might lead to greater rewards, explore, or using what you already know to maximize rewards, exploit. So let's say that an algorithm or an organism or a graduating senior is set before an uncertain environment that offers rewards, but you have no idea what the rules are. And even if you learn them, they can change on you. So what do? You have to explore. Just sometimes that means just trying things out, even if there's not a clear rule set or principles. And then you learn feedback, the underlying structure of the world, and what gives you reward. So you got to explore. But you also have to exploit. Do not endlessly explore. You must build roots and a home in the world and in your professional disciplines and in your relationships. Like, it's not possible to be interdisciplinary without a discipline, without discipline. So you got to learn skills. You've got to start at the beginning, not the end. And good poetry, I think, often breaks rules and conventions, but does so in a way that's conscious of them. It becomes part of the creativity. And I think art and life and interdisciplinary work in general does this. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that foundations are important. And for me, this meant going to med school, which compared to Brown undergrad, felt like a closing of all doors. And I know many people who experience a kind of paralysis of optimization when they have important life choices to make. Each choice can be felt as a narrowing. You're very aware of all the options that are getting closed off. And this paralysis is particularly pernicious when the options are actually good. But I've noticed that in these cases, it's often more important that a choice be made than it be optimized. Actions tend to beget options, and what's not realized, for example, for me until retrospect, is that each choice is also a deepening. More options end up being opened up. And even failure does this. Choices that don't work also have been the most consequential for me, actually. And I think this is one of the few things that tech culture gets right, is that we probably should make a virtue of failure. If you are not regularly failing, you're not acting at your capacity. You're well within your comfort zone. So failure is not actually failure. It's a sign that you're actually near maybe where you should be. Okay, so if you will indulge me, I am a psychiatrist, and so lithium, which is one of the most effective psychiatric treatments known to mankind, is one of the most. It's one of the most effective treatments in psychiatry for bipolar disorder, and it's literal stardust. It's an element. It was discovered in a manner that I don't think could have happened today, and I will tell you because I love this story. So John Cade was this rural Australian psychiatrist, and he thought that schizophrenia was the product of some kind of endogenous toxin. He was very wrong. And he thought that he found this toxin. It was urea, which is the major constituent of urine after water. So with hindsight, this is a startlingly stupid idea, but he ran with it. So he isolated urea, the toxin that causes schizophrenia, he thought, and he chose to inject it into guinea pigs. Now, you can't just inject free base urea. You have to combine it with something so it'll dissolve in water. And lithium ureate, the combination, happened to be most soluble. So he injected it into guinea pigs, and they got very sleepy. And he soon realized that it's not the urea, it's the lithium. And then he thought to use it as some kind of sedative, tranquilizer. He gave it to patients who had mania. And to his shock, he found that not only did it quell their manic episodes, it also prevented their depressions. It gave them their lives back, restored them to normal functioning. And he did all of this because he had an extremely incorrect theory, but it did motivate a kind of exploration that he was able to just kind of keep rolling with new information. And it led to a treatment that I don't think we would otherwise have. And psychiatry is loaded, life is loaded with stories like this. It's motivated serendipity all the way down. And I find that people, when they're asked to sort of describe, if they have some kind of success or they do something impressive, when they ask to describe, like, how did you do that? They will often create sort of a cleaner than true story. It is actually a lot of groping around in the darkness, and things can sometimes tend to work out. So you never know what's going to be useful, even when you're wrong. And I think at the time, I felt like a lot of what I was personally doing in college was enjoyably wasting my time. I was caught up in a lot of miscellaneous passions, some academic, some not. I studied a bunch of religious studies classes. I worked at a needle exchange, did stuff with languages, hung out with a lot of interesting characters. But I'm very surprised, for me personally, what ended up being the most useful and what ended up being the most useful in my career. And these are things that I never intended to be useful, that I didn't approach instrumentally, could not have approached instrumentally. The first, and I've kind of already said this, is relationships. And I mostly mean friendships. I'm not talking about strategic networking. The second is learning how to teach yourself. That actually ended up being more important than the content of any particular class. I'm going to wrap up with some miscellaneous advice. So thing one, your character, and by this I also mean your morality, is more important than some of you may realize, and it's not something you can ever try to game. You just have to be a good person, and it'll show. You all probably have some kind of contemplative practice, and I haven't really talked about how important that has been to me and useful, but don't forget it. You'll be tempted to. I haven't meditated regularly in some time, but when I do, it's extremely helpful. And if you can make your parents happy, do it. If you can't, don't worry too much about it. But finally, I think, especially for people who are trying to do work that's not prepackaged or interdisciplinary or whatever you want to call it, the perfect mentor is an oxymoron. There's nobody that can actually show you the entire path. They can give you little bits and pieces of it, but it's you, right? The perfect mentor is you in the future. And so don't be too discouraged that there's nobody that exists that is who you want to be in the future. That's fine. You can still achieve what you want to achieve. I will end here, but I believe even in dark times, you do have bright futures ahead of you. And congratulations, and I wish you all the best.
I now would like to introduce my colleague, Professor Larson Di Fiore, who also taught all of your graduating seniors in the Senior Concentrator Seminar, for a few remarks. Larson?
Thank you. Well, it'd be hard to follow up the last two talks, but I'll do the best I can. I think usually what's expected at these commencement events is to reflect a lot on the past and to try to give a few suggestions for the future. And I tend to often dwell quite a bit on the past and wallow in it a bit. And in moving towards the future, maybe be a little too much optimism, but I'll do my best to say a few words. I think working with all of you over the last few years has been a particularly remarkable experience for me. And that's partially because I know the formal classroom has been that I've been sitting on one side of the table and you've been on the other, and I've been the teacher and you've been the students. But really, I think this is an example of, there's a saying in the Analects of Confucius, that whenever you have three people walking together, you're sure to find your teachers among them. And I've really felt that. I felt that I've learned a lot from all of our graduates in our conversations, in our interactions day to day. And also in seeing how you've navigated what I think has been really one of the most unique and unusual experiences for any students going through Brown. And that is coming in at the time you did in the middle of the pandemic. And this was a time when, as Professor Roth was saying earlier, everything about the structure that we had was different than the way that we normally do things. We weren't meeting in person. We were seeing each other in these little boxes on Zoom and trying to, sometimes not even seeing each other, just having the boxes all blank screens. That was always interesting. And then when we did meet, oftentimes it was with literal distance between us, 6 feet apart, and everyone's wearing masks, so it's hard to tell exactly what someone looks like and exactly what someone's feeling. And so it was this time where, in a way, we were forced to enter into a kind of contemplative studies. The whole world was put in a situation where suddenly there was this key question: who are we when all of the structures and the systems and the rules that we normally go by, the normal social expectations of where things are going in the future, don't seem to work anymore? Who are we? How do we live in this world when we're, say, forced to be stuck in our room for days on end and can't talk to anybody, or maybe just one other person? And then that becomes a problem all on its own when it's just a few other people. Who are we relating to them? And so I think, in a way, the whole world was going through this process of contemplative studies. And that, as Professor Roth mentioned, brought in a lot of students to our classes. And I think also ended up profoundly influencing all of our graduates, all of you, in our conversations. Many of you have talked about that. And I think that's what has impressed me the most in those conversations. These times were so difficult. In a way, you were robbed of what would have been a normal college experience, a normal freshman experience especially. And yet, you found ways to deal with it. You found ways to learn. You found ways to make the most of it. And you made the contemplative practices, the ideas, the traditions, the study of them, such a huge part of who you were. And use that, I could see, in a way to talking about cultivating a kind of morality, a kind of ethics, a kind of way of relating to other people that is really kind and really humane, truly coming from a humane core of believing in trying to find the best for other people. And so that's been really impressive to me too, to see how you have taken the things that we have taught and you've been making it your own. And so when looking forward to the future, making those comments, I feel like the very best advice I can give is just keep doing what you've been doing. I've seen how all of you have gone on this deep exploration. You've encountered each thing, each challenge, each question, and you've responded to it in such wonderful ways. When you've needed help, when you've needed teachers, you've reached out to it. You've done the right things, even if sometimes it feels confusing and even sometimes it feels like it's a mess and you're just lost in the fog. But it's been going well, somehow. And I have every confidence that all of you, if you just continue along this path, you continue along that way, will find a way to really do something good for yourselves and also for the world, to share that with everyone else. So those are just my comments as a teacher who feels humbled by his students. And I hope all of us can join together in celebrating our graduates on this wonderful day.
I'll announce the graduates, and then you stand over here and give them their diploma. So it's now time to award the diplomas. So it's fine to take pictures when your child or friend or partner is receiving a diploma. And we've got a particular order. So I'll pick them up and I'll hand them to you and to give to the student. So I need the list. I forgot.
The diplomas are now, you have to print them out yourself now.
Right.
DIY.
The diplomas are actually being sent to you via email, but we will send you. Oh no, maybe they'll actually send you a real one and on real paper. I mean, after all, it's the least they can do. Right. You have to print it out yourself. We're going to present diplomas to the following students. Right. So from the class of 23.5, Ed Shea. From the class of 2024, we'd like to acknowledge Natalie Amaz, who is doing a commencement in a different program. And then the next person up is Giordana Esmeralda Cereta Fiorentino. Claire Hightower is receiving her diploma in a different concentration. The next person is Ganeshwari Karai. Elisa Kim. James Leet. Peter Forrest Sage. Gabe Toth. Archer Zurich is graduating in another concentration. And finally, dual RISD and Brown, RISD Brown dual concentrators have a difficult road to hoe. And it's a particularly challenging way to get your undergraduate degree. But we have one in our graduating class to whom we'd like to present a diploma today, and that is Yukti Agarwal. And finally, we are going to announce the recipients of two very important awards. We don't always give them out, but there are two awards. One is for the outstanding senior paper submitted in 2024, and it's the Kathy Kerr Prize. Please take an opportunity to look in your programs about, there's a little biographical paragraph about Kathy Kerr. Kathy was an Amherst undergrad. She did a PhD in history at Johns Hopkins, and then discovered that she had a serious illness that caused her to rethink her trajectory, and she decided to retrain as a neuroscientist. She received a very prestigious NIH R01 award. She retooled herself completely and became a very successful neuroscientist working at MIT with Chris Moore, who has since come to the Brown faculty. In 2011, Kathy joined us here in Contemplative Studies and threw in her lot with a bunch of people who were misfits in each of our own home departments, who we were working together to create this new undergraduate concentration and program. And she turned down a much more lucrative offer to work for the Center for Mindfulness at UMass Worcester. And she came here and worked very closely with a number of our students, including Chloe Zimmerman, who in essence ran Kathy's lab for the last 2 years she was with us. She presented her research to the Dalai Lama in a Mind and Life Institute meeting in India at the Sera Monastery in 2015, but came back very sick. She had a very impacted immune system. She also explored Chinese medicine as an alternative to being treated to Western medicine. She used them both together. She was a great believer, a practitioner of Qigong, visited China a number of times. And in her honor, we have created what we call the Kerr Vital Energy lecture series, many of which are online. And we invite those of you who are interested, please go to our website. We have a brand new website. It took 2 years for us to complete the re-editing and redesign of the website, and there are lots of links on the website. And there you will find one for the Kerr lecture series. So we have created the prize for the outstanding senior paper in Kathy's honor. The first prize goes to an East Asian Studies concentrator whose graduation ceremony was moved to the bottom of the hill, and who is going to try to make it in person, but I don't see him here. So it's Keenan Kelly. Keenan is headed for the Peace Corps. He's going to Mongolia. So he'll have plenty of time to read. And he'll be teaching English there for 2 years. Let's see, the other recipient of the outstanding senior paper, Catherine Kerr Prize, for a capstone paper is Yukti Agarwal. We actually have I think this is yours.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes,
this
that's
is yours.
Thank
It's also been unusual to do a senior thesis in that it involves a 2-semester sustained research project in the humanities or in the sciences that necessitates both finding someone to work with you for the full year, but also being so engaged and committed to a particular project that you have the energy and the perspicacity to carry it out. So it's unusual when it happens, but we do have 2 very successful senior theses, and we'd like to give awards to the students who completed them. And this would be the Varela Award, Francisco Varela Award. Many of you know, maybe many of you don't know, certainly all our students know about a very important book that is foundational to the new field of contemplative studies. It's called The Embodied Mind. And the the kind of visionary whose work reforming cognitive science and the tendency in cognitive science to treat the human mind as a computer, critiquing that and talking about the importance of understanding how the mind works only in coordination with the body, and the importance of the way in which we are not passive recipients of situations in our lives. We actually co-create these situations. Francisco Varela was a Chilean neuroscientist and philosopher who left Chile in 1973 very suddenly when the Allende government was overthrown. And he went to live in Paris, and he was very, very engaged with the philosophical community there, and is a real pioneer in the development of the entire field of contemplative science. So we named this, actually, and also his last wife, Amy Varela Cohen, she'd be upset with me if I said what year she graduated. But anyway, she graduated from Pembroke, slightly before Pembroke and Brown became one campus. So we have this prize for the outstanding senior thesis, and we would like to award, yes. The first one goes to Jordana Smelda Serreta Fiorentino. And finally, the outstanding award for senior thesis in the humanities and the arts goes to Ed Shea. And finally, as we end, we'd like to ask any of the graduates if they want to spontaneously add anything to the comments that they've made in their statements. If there's anything you want to say, but don't feel like you have to. I mean, this is a captive audience, so that you know what it's like to be a professor. You have often captive audiences. But you're certainly welcome to make any short comments you'd like to make. Peter?
Hi, I'd just like to say maybe one short thing. In my 4 years here at Brown, and especially studying meditation with my main meditation teacher, Chugini Rinpoche, who I was fortunate enough to connect with through the Contemplative Studies Department, I think the biggest thing I've taken away, in short, is the one reliable thing in this entire world is sincere kindness. The wish that others and ourselves may have happiness and be free from suffering. And whatever expressions that may take externally, that will never betray us. When we keep sincere kindness in our heart, it will result in our own happiness and states of joy for those around us. If we lose that sincere kindness, we cannot help but be overtaken by anger, pride, jealousy, greed, and not seeing how our experience is becoming confused. But if we make a firm commitment to being very gentle and soft with ourselves and other people, which is not a message we receive very often. So please, my sincere request to myself and to all of you is to keep that sincere kindness in our hearts. And if we've gotten disconnected with it because of this crazy world that we live in, that does not mean that we're a bad person. We can always reconnect. Our shared teacher, me and Hal Roth, Professor Hal Roth, share a teacher named Sokni Rinpoche. And I once heard him say, somebody asked him, is it ever too late to reconnect with love? Sokni Rinpoche said, never too late, never too late. So let us all keep kindness in our hearts, commit to not hurting ourselves, not hurting other people. And yes, thank you.
I just want to say something very quickly. A thank you to Larson Di Fiore, who served as my advisor on the thesis. It was a a year-long conversation over coffee that evolved and changed and grew and stripped away. And it was really, it was an amazing journey, as all of this was. The last, it's a 25-year story from, I took 2 gap decades between my freshman and sophomore year and then my junior and senior year when I came back to concentrate in contemplative studies. And I left the first time with a lot added to my mind, to my life. I came back and that was stripped away. It was a very different experience. It was what Carl Jung calls the second half of life. A door opened, I walked through it, it was held open by these people and by these students who, just to share, classrooms and cushion time was just life-changing. I want to thank Srini for a profound thing that came out of a course that he teaches called Music and Meditation. And it was, I don't even know the precise thing that we were talking about, but I remembered that when someone asked me once how I learned or when I learned to act, which is what I did for so many years. And in that class, I realized that I hadn't learned to act. I remembered something that was always in me. And what the last years here have done for me is to find the love of that again, that was lost to materialism, ego, pursuits that had nothing to do with a flowering of that gift that I was given. And it was in that final class that door opened to understanding that. So I'm grateful for that. Thank you.
Then without further ado, please, let's all give a warm round of applause to the graduates of the class of 2024 and related.